अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकाया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापादकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कंचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नाम्ने गौरतुषे नमः। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपसिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानं पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna and welcome again back to the Sri Damodarashtakam classes. So today we are going to be beginning the third text, but firstly I'll just quickly recap what we've covered yesterday and the day before. Because this Damodarashtakam, it rather systematically goes through text by text by text. It goes through this rather with a rather logical process. So it's nice to see how the texts, they all feed into each other and they all build upon each other. Actually, this Damodarashtakam is one of the greatest pieces of Sanskrit poetry that exists. It is very, very nuanced, very, very deep. So, just to recap, the first 2 days we've been covering the first two texts. And the first two texts really are just one big text. Of course, in terms of syllables, there are two texts. But in terms of meaning, it is one thing. And what is that one thing? It is describing all of the many objects of the verb namami. Namam Ishvaram, Sachidananda Rupam. So it is describing all of these things that we are namami, that, or rather, he who is singing this, he who is singing this, it is describing all of the things that he or she is paying their respects and their worship to. And so that begins, and it follows a structure, going from the lower thing to the higher thing to the higher thing to the higher thing. First we begin with Tattva, Sachidananda Rupam, Ishvaram, like this. Then we move on to the form of Krishna, Lasat Kundalam. Then we move on to his associates, Krishna alongside his associates, Gokule Brajamanam. And then lastly, we hear for the remainder of the first text and all of the second text that he about his pastimes. Because when all those things come together, we hear about the wonderful Yashodabhiyo Lukaladhavamanam Param Rishtamatyantato Drutya Gopya Rudantam Muhur Netra Yugmam Rijantam Karam Bhoja Yugmena Satanka Netra. So like this we are hearing all the glorious, beautiful pastimes. And then we end with then text 2 with the mentioning, who is this personality who is so filled with all of these beautiful pastimes, beautiful associates, beautiful form, beautiful tattva. We hear that Damodaram Bhakti Baddham, that Damodar, that personality who was bound at the belly, bound at the stomach by the rope. That Damodaram, who is also Bhakti Baddham, who was bound not by the rope, but by the devotion which ties the rope. but by the devotee who applies the rope to him. So like this we heard. Text 3 that we are beginning today is discussing something a little beyond this now. And it begins, iti drik, iti drik swalilabhir ananda kunde. This word iti, it actually has a very specific meaning. It has a very specific connotation. This word iti is used in Sanskrit because in Sanskrit there is no indirect speech. In English we have direct speech and we have indirect speech. So in English we will say, he said this. And we can also say that I am so and so, said he. Like this we can say. So there are the two options, the quotation marks, if you will. So to give the example, if somebody says, my name is Bob, then we could say, he said his name is Bob. This is indirect speech. Or we could say, my name is Bob, said Bob, or said the man. This is direct speech. Like this. Sanskrit does not have the first one. It only has the second one. And so what are the quotation marks by which we can say this speech in Sanskrit? It is iti. After you say iti, this means this is what they have said. Thus, therefore. It has this sort of meaning. So, an example would be Srimad Bhagavatam. We hear Brahmetmi Paramateti Bhagavaniti Shabdyate. That the great personalities, they are constantly saying what? Brahmeti, Brahma iti, Brahma and then quotation mark, Paramatmeti, Paramatma iti. They're saying this as well. And then Bhagavan iti. They're saying these three things. And therefore iti, iti, iti. So he is saying here. Also it can have the meaning though of thus. Having said this, thus we reach this point. Having said this, thus this is said. So this is the meaning that is meant here. Iti. In light of this, in light of these prayers, thus, therefore, what is it? Idrik. So we can take it as meaning thus. We can also mean that it is saying in reference to these previous things, around this quotation mark that is now being placed around the Namami very long mega sentence. Iti drik. Drik, the word drik is like darshan. We all know this word darshan, to see, sight. So having had seen this, having had seen what? This. Lasat kundalang gokule bhrajamanam yashodabhiyo lukaladhavamanam param rishtamatyan tatodrutaigo gopya rudantam muhur netra yugmam rijantam karam bhoja yugmena shatanka netram. Seeing this, iti, iti, after all of this, seeing all of these pastimes, all of these qualities, all of these things, iti drik. Having had seen these, then we hear of text 3. So text 3 in many ways is speaking about the effect that the text is having on those people who are witnessing these wonderful pastimes. And in many ways we are witnessing as well. We are hearing of it. We can hear in Srimad Bhagavatam. This is as good, almost. It's about as good as we are going to get, at least, to how it is to witness that directly. So all of these personalities who can see this, what is the effect they are having? So the first text in many ways was discussing tattva, rupa, associates, pastimes like this. The second text was diving then into the pastime even deeper. And this third text now is talking about those personalities who relish this pastime, who enjoy this pastime. This is being described now in the third text. And what do we hear about them? Iti driksva lila bhir ananda kunde svaghosham nima jantam. So this sentence, it ends with nima jantam. Akhyapayantam begins sort of the second section of this. But what do we hear? iti driksva lilabhir ananda kunde. So we are hearing, by seeing these pastimes of Krishna, we were speaking about him, with his eyes taking the tears out so sweetly, looking around everywhere, so afraid, with his beautiful neck marked with those 3 lines like a conch shell, running around, all of these beautiful things. And when witnessing these things, which are what? Svalilabhir, by them, Ananda Kunde, within the ocean of Ananda, of bliss. Svaghosham, the very family and associates of Krishna, Nimajantam, they are immersed. So maybe this will not make so much sense with the word for word. But if we understand these words, each one, so after iti drik, so displaying in this way, showing in this way that we can see these things, what happens? Svalilabhir. Svalilabhir is in what we call the instrumental. It is the tool. It is the tool that Krishna uses in order to achieve the effect he wishes. It is the tool. And what is the tool that is being used? Not just his leelas, but svalila, which are his intimate pastimes and also his highest and greatest pastimes. This is the purport of this word swa. This word swa, on one hand, means the most intimate pastimes of Krishna. Those pastimes of Krishna which so intimately make Krishna Krishna. These ones, by revealing these ones, he is doing this. So, through the means of his very own pastimes, his very own Leela, what is he doing? Nima Jantam. He is immersing. He is immersing who? Svaghosham. The same word, sva. His very own Ghosham, his very own family, his very own fellow residents of Gokul. All of them, they are being immersed by the tool of his wonderful pastimes. But what are they being immersed in? Ananda Kunde. This is the locative. So it is a location where something is happening. Of Ananda Kunda. We know Radha Kund. We know Shyama Kund. We know all these kunds. We know Uddhav Kund. Like this. So Ananda Kund is the kund, the pond, the pool. The pool of what? Of Ananda. Of transcendental bliss. That Krishna who is Satchid Ananda Rupam, Namamishwaram Satchid Ananda Rupam, Satchid Ananda. He is taking who? He is taking Svaghosham, his family, and all the residents of Gokul. He is taking them and he is immersing them in that very Ananda which composes his body through the means of his Hladini Shakti, his bliss potency. Like this, Krishna, he is achieving all of these great things. So, with this one, we should understand there are, unlike the previous one, the previous 2 texts, which is one big sentence, the third text in many ways is split into 2 texts. So, 2 sentences. The first one ends with Nimajantam. And the next one begins with Akhya Payantam. And what does this mean? Akhya Payantam means to make something known. And there is also a great purport to this. A great purport to this sentence. Akhya Payantam. Tadiyeshita Gyeshu Bhaktair Jitatvam Puna Prematastam Shata Vritti Vande. So, Krishna, he is making known. But who? What is he making known? He is making known his bhaktair jitatvam, that he is conquered by his bhaktas. Again here, bhaktair is his devotees, and jitatvam, we know the word jai. Jai, we say jai, all glories, all glories. But most literally the word jai means all victories, all victories. And the word jai, it comes from ji. Ji is a Sanskrit root. So jitatvam means the conquering. So, Akhya Payantam, Krishna makes known that he is conquered by his devotees. His devotees conquer him fully. But who is he making this known to? His devotees? Well, his devotees in many ways already know this. Who is he making it known to? Tadiyeshita gyeshu. Those who are filled and those who are desirous of knowing, of having a jnana-filled conception of Krishna's Aishvarya. Those who want to hear of that Ishvar, those who want to meditate on Namamishwaram rather than Namami lasat kundalang gokule brajamanam yashodabhiyo lukaladhavamanam paramrishtamatyan tatodrutya gopya. Those who want to meditate on Namamishwaram, for these people, Krishna, he is revealing this. And this is the other thing he's doing, iti drik, displaying in his pastimes. So by displaying these sweet pastimes, he's doing two things. One, he is placing all his associates in an ocean of bliss. And secondly, he is revealing to all of those who wish to have some Vaikuntha understanding of Krishna. Krishna, the great king. Actually, there is a pastime of some disciples of Srila Prabhupada. They went down to South India once and they were speaking to a devotee in the Ramanujacharya line. And this devotee, very, very sweet devotee, and very much picking up that mood of the Ramanujacharya line, the Sri Vaishnavas. And they were speaking Krishna Katha, and he was laughing and having such a sweet time. Because naturally, how can we not? How can we hear these wonderful pastimes of Krishna and not smile, not laugh, not be made so happy upon hearing such nectarian, transcendental activities? So like this, they were laughing and they were joking and they were relishing Katha together. And so one of those Prabhupada disciples, he spoke and he said, Prabhu, when we are speaking of Krishna, when we are speaking of Bhagavatam, you are so jovial, you are so happy. And then he says, you are laughing so much. But when we discuss Narayan, and before that Prabhupada disciple could even finish his sentence, the devotee says, no, that is another thing. That is another thing. Completely serious. The smile dropped from his face. And he was very serious. No, this is a different thing. Narayan is a different thing. All of the Aishvarya, all of the opulence kicks in at that point. This is a very sweet example of the sweet rasa of the Sri Vaishnavas, having so much respect and reverence. Krishna is having some fun, but the ultimate reality is Narayan, who is the great king. And we should be very serious like this. And of course, devotees say we should also be serious with Krishna. But it is a very jovial, a very sweet respect, seriousness. It is not a opulent one filled with awe and reverence. And so the Sri Vaishnavas, they will say this. But the devotees of Mahaprabhu, we will say, the Aishvarya of Narayan is amazing, and we offer unlimited Dandavat pranams to it. But it is not greater than the sweetness of Krishna. Our Supreme Personality of Godhead is that Krishna who laughs with his friends, who cries when his mother is angry with him. Our Supreme Personality of Godhead is he who so naturally pulls all of our hearts to him by the complete sweetness of his loving reciprocal relationships with all of his devotees. This is our Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in order to remove the ideas of those people, of those individuals, of those personalities who would want to say that that this Aishvarya aspect is the greatest. For this, Krishna, he is manifesting these sweet, sweet pastimes. And then what do we hear? Puna prematasta shatavriti vande. So again, Puna, we know the famous shlok from Bhagavad Gita. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tattvataha tyaktva deham punar janma naiti mameti sorjuna. Punar janma, to take birth again. Na eti. Na eti. They are not going to take birth again. Mameti. Sorjuna. They come to me. He comes to me, O Arjuna. So punar. Punar janma means again. So punar. Prematas, filled with prem, with love and devotion. Prematas tam, onto tam, onto Shri Shri, Lord Damodar, Shatavriti vande. Shatavriti, hundreds and hundreds of times vande. I give my vande. I give my praise, my worship. I give all of that unto that Supreme Lord. Again and again. Constantly we are hearing the respects are being given by Satyavrata Muni unto Sri Sri Radha Damodar. We heard a tiny bit before about how Radha, she is present, even if we are not seeing. How is Krishna running without Srimati Radharani? Srimati Radharani is the source of all his potencies. How can Krishna run? He's running Dhavamanam. He is running as fast as he can. How can he do this if he is not empowered by Srimati Radharani? How is this possible? It is not. So like this, Sri Sri Radha Damodar. But this will become clearer soon. Exactly, exactly how to what extent Radha Damodar is central to this text. So again, with love and devotion, onto that Lord Damodar, I'm giving hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times my Vande. So Vande is similar to Namami. We know Vande Ham Shri Guru Shri Yutapa the Kamalam. Vande means to give praise. Vande Ham is a very famous one. So like this, he has said, this Damodar, who is manifesting all these sweet pastimes. This Damodar, he is he is the one who I am thousands of times. Again, I'm saying I worship him, filled with prem. Not that I worship him for any other goal. This will come up in the next text. I fill him with love and devotion. Naturally, prem comes from me. Actually, Krishna, he does almost everything. We sometimes say Krishna has no reason to do anything. Actually, these side effects, we can sometimes say these side effects are just side effects. Ultimately, Krishna is not performing his pastimes in order that those who are wanting to understand him in his Aishvarya will realize Bhaktari Chitatvam. In one sense, we can say this. We can say that he is not doing this in order to put his devotees into a pool of bliss. He's just doing it because he's a Supreme Lord. He can do whatever he wants, and this is true. But on the other hand, what did we hear before? Damodaram Bhakti Baddham. That Damodar is Bhakti Baddham. He is bound by the love of his devotees. He is bound by their love and affection for him. So actually, even though in one sense we can say in Tattva, in philosophy, Krishna, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is Sarva Karana Karanam. He is Anadir Adir Govindaha, or in this case, Anadir Adir Damodaraha. Even though he is all of these things, he ultimately does everything to please his devotees because he is Bhakti Baddham. He is bound by his devotee, and therefore, to please his devotees, he does all that he can. So, let us speak a tiny bit from the commentaries of Srila Sanatana Goswami. So when Svaghosham, obviously I've mentioned a few things already before, but we'll speak a little more in depth. So Svaghosham means his own family and all of the residents of Gokul. This is who he is placing in an ocean of bliss. However, another meaning of Ghosham doesn't mean necessarily that Ghosha means his family. Ghosha can also mean to proclaim the glory of something, to speak and glorify something. Ghosham. And in this sense, we can say that maybe Svaghosham either means he is glorifying either himself or those who belong to him. So Krishna, in this sense, he is explaining either the glories of himself or the glories of his devotees. And by this, it is not his devotees who fall into the Ananda Kunda then. Then we must understand Krishna, by speaking the glories of his devotees. This is in one sense the highest understanding of this text. One way, by his own pastimes, he is pouring his family, his devotees, all of them into a pool of bliss. But in another sense, by his own pastimes, he is proclaiming the glory of his devotees. Svasya, Svanam, Svanam, those who belong to him, those gopas and gopis who all are his own associates. He is glorifying them, and therefore Svaghosham. Svaghosham, and by Svaghosham, by this Svaghosham, by this glorification that he is doing through his pastimes, Krishna is manifesting these pastimes now, not to put his devotees in an ocean of bliss, but to put himself in the ocean of bliss. Because now Ananda Kunde, who is being immersed in this ocean of bliss, not Krishna's devotees, but Krishna himself. Why? Because he is able to glorify his devotees. This is another understanding we can have. So then, this is another way to understand this statement. So in one way, there are three ways we can understand this. Iti driksva lila bhir ananda kunde svaghosham nima jantam. One is the standard way. By his pastimes, he is placing his devotees in a pool of bliss. The other way we can understand is by his pastimes, he is glorifying himself and therefore putting himself in an ocean of bliss. But in another way we can understand it is that by his pastimes, he is glorifying his devotees, and therefore Krishna is being put into a great Ananda Kund. Very many sweet ways we can understand this. So, then we continue speaking. So this glory of these devotees is very, very high. And I will comment upon this, and if there is time remaining, then I will speak a bit more about the remaining text, the remaining words of this text. I wanted to speak a few pastimes because I'm thinking maybe I will be boring a little bit, speaking only about Sanskrit words, Sanskrit meanings like this. So there are a few pastimes that reinforce this understanding that Krishna's devotees, their glorification is the highest thing. Not just for Krishna. What to speak, Krishna is Satchit Ananda Rupam. He's having all bliss. His form is literally made of infinite bliss. This is Krishna. This is Namamishwaram Satchit Ananda Rupam. But even though he himself is made of bliss, he is placed into the Ananda Kunda. He is placed into the ocean of bliss. How? By Swaghosham. By glorifying his own devotees. If Krishna himself, who is composed entirely of pure bliss, whose potency, Srimati Radharani, is the source and the personification of Mahabhav, the highest forms of bhakti, which is the real condensation of the Hladini Shakti, the potency by which bliss and joy may be tasted. If Krishna himself, that Krishna, who is Ananda Rupam, who is the Shaktiman of the Hladini Shakti, if that Krishna is placed into an Ananda Kund by the glorification of the Vaishnavas, how much ecstasy, how much joy can we be placed in if we speak the glories of the devotees? There's so many great glories of the devotees. They are so unlimited. In one sense, the Srimad Bhagavatam is almost more about the glories of the devotees than it is about the glories of Bhagavan. Krishna's loving servants are the focal piece of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the glorification of the devotees is higher than even the worship of Krishna, because even Krishna himself is made ecstatic by service or by service to his devotees. In this text, it is mainly through speaking their glories. So I have a pastime then that I would like to share about a devotee named Trilochan. This devotee, Trilochan, he was born in a Vaishya family. And being born in a Vaishya family, he was expected to observe the family traditions. But instead of this, instead of following all the family traditions, doing all the family duties, instead what he did was he served the devotees. However, as much as he wanted to serve the devotees, there was so much he could not do. Because it was only him and his wife who were living at home. Him and his wife together, they were cooperating, working together, working hard in order to please the devotees. This was his real passion. And so constantly he was serving the Vaishnavas. But with only his wife, he was not able to help. He was not able to fully serve them. He was always so busy. So in his heart, there became a small desire that was born. And his desire was that he wanted to have a servant who would be able to understand Vaishnav Seva, not just any servant, but a servant who would understand how to serve the devotees. Somebody who could help him in this way. He was thinking, I'm an eternally a servant of the Lord's servant. Surely I would hope that a servant would be given to me, not to serve me, but to help me serve the devotees. But what can I do? I'm not able to find any such servant. But one day, lamenting and lamenting and lamenting, as Trilochan was, a servant appeared at his door, and he knocked, because Krishna, he provides whatever the devotee desires. And so a servant appeared at Trilochan's door, and he knocked. And this servant was covered only with a torn blanket. He only had a blanket around his body, and he had shoes that weren't even together, broken shoes. These days we could say the soles were coming off. And Trilochan, this devotee, he saw him outside his house, and he said, "Who are you?" You're thinking, who is this person with just a blanket, a torn, ripped blanket around their body, and broken shoes on their feet? He looked at him and he said, "Who are you? Where have you come from? Are you an orphan? Do you not have any parents? Is this your situation?" And the servant said, "What you have said is true. I do not have any parents. I have no mother and no father." And then Trilochan, his heart being filled, both with excitement that his wish he felt is now being fulfilled, and also with mercy, seeing this person who he feels so much pity for not having a mother or father. Trilochan, he says, "Please work for me. I need a servant who will help me serve all of the Vaishnavas." And the poor man with the broken shoes and the torn blanket for a chadar said, "If my master's nature matches my nature, then I am happy to take up this work." And then Trilochan, he was confused. He thought, hey, what a weird response. Normally people say yes, no, what's in it for me, or what are the working conditions, or when can I start? Who says this if my master's nature matches my nature? So Trilochan, he says, what do you mean? Why would anyone's nature not match your nature? What is the implication of this? And the servant, he said, "Prabhu, every day I eat 5 or 6 kilos of rice. Because of this, people have become very, very upset with me, and they will not hire me. Furthermore, I know the principles of the 4 Varnas. I carry out all my allotted work perfectly. In my work, I do not require help from a single person. As far as serving the devotees is concerned, I have been serving the devotees my whole life. This new service, this is not a new service. You think you are giving me a new service, but it is nothing new. My name is Antaryami. I will please become your servant." And Trilochan, he smiled. And he said, "Don't worry, eating, whatever. If you are serving the devotees, then you yourself also are such a great devotee. I will happily give you all the rice that you need. Do not feel shy at all." And like this, Trilochan, he accepted Antaryami into his house. And he gave him a pair of new shoes. And he also gave him a new blanket. And allowed him to be bathed very nicely. So he was very clean and very presentable. Trilochan, he in fact also told his wife. He said, "Please, Antaryami, you should understand, he is our servant, he is your servant. He is not my servant, but he is your servant. Understand him to be this. Please feed him to his full satisfaction. If he runs away, where will we be able to find another servant who has been serving the devotees his entire life? Please feed him whenever he wants to eat, whenever he says he is hungry. Please feed him. Give him whatever prasad he requires. He will serve the devotees every single day. And being such an elevated person who is constantly engaged in serving the devotees, please, you serve him every day as well. It is our duty to live together throughout our lives, serving the Vaishnavas and singing Hari Kirtan. And so, like this arrangement went on very nicely. And many saintly people, many sadhus, many Vaishnavas, they would gather at Sri Trilochan's house. And serving these devotees, Antaryami, he became very excited. He had such a deep-seated desire to serve these Vaishnavas. And so, according to whatever the devotees desired, Antaryami, he would massage their feet, he would massage their bodies, he would give them whatever prasad they needed, he would take care of all their needs. And like this, he very nicely took care of the Vaishnavas. So for around a little over, maybe a month or so, over a year, this happened. This has been happening. This has been going on. And one day, Trilochan's wife, she was visiting one of the neighbors, just a friendly social visit. And the lady, she said, the friend, the neighbor, who Trilochan's wife was visiting, she saw Trilochan's wife. And she was a little disturbed. And she said, "You are looking so weak. You're looking so morose. You're looking so skinny. What has happened?" And the wife, she said, "What can I do?" With a weak smile, she said, "My husband brought a servant from somewhere. But even after eating so much prasad, he is not satisfied. Therefore, I have to cook more and more and more and more and more and more all the time. And because of this, I have become so weak. Please do not tell this to anyone. Just keep it to yourself. If my husband comes to know this, or if the servant comes to know this, it will be very uncomfortable, as they will become deeply regretful. The servant may even leave." But there is a detail we should know about this Antaryami, because this Antaryami, his name, there are some names which sometimes do not reflect the character of some people. We hear some people maybe are given all sorts of names. And names have meanings, all of them. But maybe somebody may be having the name Krishnan, but his skin is very fair. Like this. This is possible. But Antaryami was not like this, because Antaryami was in reality the Antaryami, the Paramatma. This was Krishna, the Supreme Lord himself, in the form of a devotee. And as soon as she said this, he heard this, being the spirit soul in Trilochan's wife's heart. And like this, he left Trilochan's house. And leaving it, he was thinking the condition that my needs should be met is not being met, because there is some complaint, there is some issue. So therefore, he left, and Trilochan, he became very upset. He became severely depressed, thinking, how can I feed the devotees? How can I take care of anyone? Sometimes we see fish when they come out of the water. They are like, they don't know what to do. We see them, they move around like this. They're splashing around, fish out of water, completely dejected, completely depressed, completely crushed. In the same way, Trilochan, he became like this. And for 3 days after Antaryami left, Trilochan, he did not even eat or drink anything. And whenever he saw his wife, he would always say, "Where will we find another beautiful, intelligent servant like that? Why did you complain like that?" He was so very fond of serving the devotees, and you, by serving him, made so much spiritual progress. Now we have lost such an amazing servant. What do we do? And so he lamented and lamented with tears in his eyes. While he was lamenting like this, though, a voice, Akashvani spoke, a voice from the sky, and it said thunderously, "Take your food and drink. I am so pleased with your service mentality towards the devotees, and that is why I rendered service to the devotees as your servant. Actually, I am not even their servant. I am your servant, because your beautiful devotion has controlled me. I am always the antaryami, not just of your heart, but also of your house. Whenever you want, I can return and serve while staying in your house." Hearing this, Trilochan, he began to understand what had happened. Who this antaryami was who had stayed in his house, who had served the devotees under his guidance. And hearing this, Trilochan, he became even more upset. And he lamented and lamented, and he began to cry out, and he repented, and he said, "Shame on me, shame on me. I treated the Supreme Lord as my servant. Jiber Sharup hoye Krishner Nitto Das." Not that Krishner Sharup hoye Jiber Nitto Das. It is not that Krishna Sarup is the eternal servant of the Jiva. The Supreme Lord was here, and I could not act as his servant. He stayed here, but I could not offer, and I did not offer him any seva. How disgraceful I am. How shameful is my behavior and attitude. My face should be revolting to the sight of the devotees. People there calling me a devotee all the time. But I have rendered no service to the Supreme Lord. I will hide my face from every single devotee. I am too embarrassed to show the face of such a fallen person and therefore degrade all the other devotees. How foolish am I that I'm doing so much spiritual practice and I could not even recognize the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is so merciful, so affectionate that he appeared before me and I could not recognize him. The Lord saw all of my defects up close and then he is still glorifying me. He is so affectionate towards his devotee that he simply looked at my good qualities and ignored all my faults. He came to my house and he stayed for so long, and yet I am so foolish that I could not recognize him. If he ever returns, I will fall down at his lotus feet. And in this way, Trilochan remained in constant consciousness of Antaryami, of the Supreme Lord. He only ate. He only ate because of the direct instruction of the Lord. This is the glories of the devotee. Krishna is so captured by the devotion of the devotee that he will even appear in the household of the devotee in order to please that devotee, in order to please that devotee's desires. In order to do so, Krishna will so happily. But what happens to the devotee? Does he become arrogant? Does he think, wow, Krishna is under my control? No. He just laments in turn, thinking of his fallen condition. Not that the Vaishnavas are fallen, but in their humility, they think they are. So like this, we can understand what is that elevated position. Krishna himself desires to serve his devotees. Krishna himself desires to glorify his devotees, which is why Swalilabhir Ananda Kunde Swaghosham Nima Jantam. And this is also why Akhyapayantam Tadiyeshita Gyeshu Bhaktair Jitatvam. I want to make clear to all of those desirous of knowing his Aishwarya aspect. What does he want them to know? Bhaktair Jitatvam. That I am the sort of Supreme Personality of Godhead who appears to my dear Trilochan as Antaryami. This is my identity. This is who I am. This is Krishna. There is another pastime that speaks of the glories of Vaishnav Seva, of pleasing the devotees, of worshipping the devotees. And this is a pastime of Sri Srila Ramanujacharya. Sri Srimad Ramanujacharya, we know, is a great preacher, a great acharya of the Lakshmi Sampradaya. And a desire arose in his heart one day that he wanted to see Sri Saila. The very holy temple is there. And he wished to take pilgrimage to see it. And so a few days later, he left Sri Rangam, taking a few of his disciples, and they went together chanting Hari Kirtan. And so they went on this journey, and this journey is a rather long journey. And at the night, at the end of the first day of the journey, they stopped in a town called Dehali. On the next day, they walked very, very far to a village called Astasasra. And in Astasasra, there were two of Ramanuja's disciples, Yagyesh and Varadacharya. Varadacharya. Intending, he wanted to pass his time in the house of Yagyesh. This was Ramanujacharya's disciples. Because Yagyesh, he was a very wealthy merchant. So he had a lot of facility. So Ramanujacharya thought this will be not an inconvenience for Yagyesh to host me. And so with this, Sri Yatiraj sent two of his followers ahead and said, please, please, let Yagyesh, my disciple, know that I'm coming to visit. Hearing this, Yagyesh was very, very happy. Of course, his spiritual master was there, and his spiritual master wanted to stay at his house. And so he began to make all of the arrangements necessary for receiving the party of the devotees. But he was so absorbed in this that he completely forgot about the two messengers. He was planning, oh, Gurudev is coming, Gurudev is coming. And he began to plan. And with these two messengers in front of him, he almost ignored them. He didn't even give them a glass of water to drink. And these two messengers, they became somewhat hurt, somewhat upset. And they returned to Ramanujacharya. And they told him every single detail of what had taken place, including that which had made them so upset, so insulted, so hurt. Hearing this, Ramanujacharya, he was far from pleased. He was, in fact, very, very displeased. How could they do this? Ramanujacharya was thinking. This is such a complete neglect of Vaishnav qualities, of Vaishnav etiquette. How could he treat my dear disciples like this? His dear God brothers. And so he said, we will not stay at Yagyesh's house. We will go to Varadacharya's house. And this disciple, Varadacharya, he was severely poor. He was in deep poverty. The quite opposite of Yagyesh. But he was known for purity of heart. For what material riches he lacked, he had so many spiritual riches in his heart. Every morning he would go out and beg. And he would return at noon and present all that he had received from begging as an offering to the Lord. And so him and his wife, Lakshmi, who was very beautiful and very chaste, they lived their lives together like this. But there was a problem that Lakshmi had. Because when Ramanujacharya arrived at the house of Varadacharya, Varadacharya was still begging. And so naturally, Lakshmi, she received them with great respects. And paying dandavats to the lotus feet of Sri Srimad Ramanujacharya, she said, my husband, he is still begging. Please sit here and be merciful to me. Please give me the mercy of allowing me to wash your feet with water. Just nearby there is a lake. Please bathe there. And in the meantime, while you bathe, I will prepare the bhoga for Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. She entered into the kitchen after saying this. And looking around, she looked around for ingredients. But this is where her problem arose. She did not even have a single grain of rice. to serve Sri Ramanujacharya. They were so poor that they had to live hand to mouth, and so there was no rice available to feed with. And feeling great anxiety, Lakshmi, she began to consider, how will I be able to execute Guru Seva? How will I be able to feed my spiritual master? I am not a real disciple. In that village, however, there was a rich businessman, and he had recognized Lakshmi's intense beauty. And being maybe not the man of the highest character, he sent very many female messengers to try to tempt Lakshmi to cuckold her husband, to be not chaste to her husband, and to tempt her to be with him, thinking, showing off. He would give her so much money, so many jewels, because he's thinking this poor devotee who's running around begging, I'm a rich guy, no competition. But of course, Lakshmi was very chaste, very pious, and she wouldn't even look at this rascal. However, she was having a dilemma, because she was thinking, I must serve my spiritual master. And so she thought, service to the Vaishnavas, service to the Guru, it is beyond all other principles. And so she decided, I will go to this man in order to get the grains. And so she ran to the house of the businessman, quickly in secret. And she said, this evening, I will fulfill all of your desires. Almost disgusted she was. But she said, my Guru and many of his disciples have come to my house as guests. Send to our house without delay all things necessary to relieve them properly. And the merchant, who had already given up, he was surprised to hear this. And so he happily gave all of these things. He happily arranged for all of the things to be ready for the house. Because he thought, finally, I've had a victory. I did not expect this. So Lakshmi Devi, she then started preparing all of the offerings. And when everything was completed, finally she had some prasad to give to Srila Ramanujacharya and all of her god brothers. And so she served it to all of them. And they ate all of this, and they were amazed. Ramanujacharya was thinking, where did this Mataji get? This is not a very nice household. It is very clear they're financially struggling. Where did she get access to all of these wonderful food items, these beautiful foodstuffs? But anyways, they were confused, but still, they ate. And they thanked her dearly. So when Varadacharya, when he returned home, he saw his spiritual master and he was filled with bliss instantly. But then he heard about the prasad and he was very confused, thinking, well, I'm the breadwinner and I can tell you what, I have not been winning this kind of bread. What happened? So he went to his wife and he asked her, he said, hey, how were we able to get such nice food items? Where were you able to get such nice food preparations? How is this possible? And Lakshmi Devi at that moment, she began to become filled with shame. And she bowed her head down and told her husband all of the arrangements that she had made with the merchant. Pausing then, Lakshmi, she thought, now I'm ready for my husband's anger. I have done such a terrible thing. And even though I did it in the service of the spiritual master, this is such a terrible betrayal I've done. But Varadacharya, there was no anger on his face. He began to dance with joy and he cried out and he said, truly, I am the most blessed man. I am the most blessed man. And he said, you, my wife, you have shown the highest degree of chastity. Narayan, who is represented by Sri Guru. So here we find the principle. I was speaking about how Krishna is most pleased by the worship of his devotees. So here we're finding Guru is representing Narayan. He's the only Purush, and thus he is the enjoyer of Prakriti. Only a great soul can fully realize this knowledge of devotional service. How fortunate am I to be married to such a great Mataji, such a great lady, who is the embodiment of all religious knowledge, all religious principles. Varadacharya, then he went into the presence of Ramanujacharya, and he explained everything that had happened. Ramanujacharya, he then told him to sit down and take prasad in his presence. When they finished eating, he said, okay, now that you have honored this amazing prasad, you go to the businessman's house and take all the remaining prasad and give it to him. And so they went to the mansion, now not sneaking through the back door. And Varadacharya, he stayed away. But Lakshmi, she went inside. And she went to this rascal merchant. And she gave all of the prasad that she had. And seeing this, he thought, wow, this deal keeps getting better and better. What wonderful food items. And so this merchant, he did not just honor regular prasad, not just the prasad that has been left by Krishna, not just the remnants that Krishna has left, but the remnants of what Krishna has left, the remnants that have been honored, the remnants of the remnants. They are the devotees honored the remnants of Krishna, and now he is honoring the remnants of those devotees. This is even higher. And so with each bite, this merchant, he was becoming less and less of a rascal. Less and less, bit by bit, all of his lust was being purified. And by the time he had finished the prasad, it was as if the merchant had died and there was a new man in his place. With no lusty desires left in his heart, he saw Lakshmi. And what did he say? He did not say, oh, beautiful woman. He did not say, oh, come here, sit on my lap. With tears in his eyes, he said, oh, dear Mataji, I am so sinful. My fate as such a great sinner would have been the same as that hunter who was burnt to ashes when he tried to touch the chaste Damayanti. Only by your great karuna, only by your great mercy, O Mataji, have I been delivered from the hells that my karma was driving me towards. O Mataji, please forgive all of my offenses and have mercy upon me by showing me the feet of your spiritual master. And with great happiness, Lakshmi Devi, who now is so happy that she does not have to fulfill such a terrible obligation, but also that such a fallen soul may be brought to the path of spiritual life. She returned home with her husband and brought the merchant with them. And all three paid Dandavat pranams to Ramanujacharya. And Ramanujacharya, he looked with great mercy in his heart at the merchant. And touching the merchant with his hand, the man, Klesha Agni, all of his sufferings were destroyed in the fires of the mercy of the Vaishnav. And that merchant, he begged and said, please, ha Prabhu koro doya deho more pada chaya. Please, Prabhu, give me your mercy. Give me the shelter of your lotus feet. And Ramanujacharya, he said, for sure, I will initiate you. But please, help my disciples. Because Ramanujacharya, his heart was hurting about the struggle that his Brahmin disciples were having. And so he said, for Dakshina, please give a large sum of money to this Brahmin couple. And Varadacharya, speaking to his spiritual master, he said, oh, Gurudev, by your mercy, everything that we own, everything that we require is provided for us. Everything that we need is already given to us. Money is the root of all evil. It distracts away our senses and brings our mind away from the Supreme Lord. Sometimes devotees, we make this point in Bhagavatam, that Kali, the demon, the personification of Kali Yuga, he is present in all the ways that we break the regulative principles, in slaughterhouses, in gambling houses, in alcohol houses, and in brothels. But we forget there's actually a fifth place that Kali is in, and that is wherever there is too much money being hoarded, too much gold. And so the merchant, he says, "Oh Gurudev, all that I beg of you, I will do whatever you want. The only thing I beg is, please, out of your mercy, do not ever give me the misfortune of becoming a wealthy man again." And Ramanujacharya, he was very pleased, very happy to hear these words from his disciple, to hear of the purificatory effects of Mahaprasad. And he said, "Today I have become purified by the association of such a great devotee as yourself, who is devoid of all the false material desires." And at that point, Yagyesh, that first disciple, who had not properly treated the messengers of Ramanujacharya, he entered into the house and he fell in dandavats at the lotus feet of his spiritual master. He had waited the whole time. Ramanujacharya had not even alerted him that he was not going to go to his house. And so he had waited and waited and waited. But eventually he had heard that Ramanujacharya instead, he had gone to the house of the poor Brahmin, Varadacharya. Knowing that he had committed a great offense, he went there and begged for forgiveness. Ramanujacharya looked at him and he said, "Is this unhappiness due to my not coming to your house? The reason for this was that you offended my two Vaishnav devotees. There is no higher dharma than rendering service to the Vaishnavs. And because of this, you have failed the essence of dharma." Humbled by the heavy words of his spiritual master, Yagyesh, he replied through the ocean of tears that was coming forth from his eyes, that my mind is causing such thoughtless, terrible behaviors. And this was not due to the vanity of wealth. It was because I was so eager to serve you, Gurudev, that I became neglectful of my true duty to serve the devotees. Ramanujacharya, hearing this simple response, his heart was softened. And he said, "Next time I come, I will stay in your house then." But here is the point. Ramanujacharya, he is clearly teaching the essence of all dharma is not to worship Krishna. It is not ahimsa. It is not to be chaste. It is not to follow the four regulative principles. The essence of all dharma is to serve the Vaishnavas. Even for Krishna, this is the essence of all dharma. And therefore, what do we hear? Iti driksva lilabhir ananda kunde svaghosham nima jantam. Krishna himself is immersed in an ocean of mercy by the glorification of his devotees. Anyways, we've gone a little over time, so we will conclude for tonight. Next week, when we continue these Damodarashtakam classes, we will do the other half, the remaining part of the third text, and then we will begin texts 4 and 5, which work again as a pair, similar as 1 and 2. Okay. On that note, we will see each other next week, but please try to meditate on these different meanings that we have given for the first part of the third text of Damodarashtakam, as we sing it every day in this holy Kartik month. Shri Shri Kartik Mas ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Damodar ki jai, Shri Satyavrata Muni ki jai, Shri Shri Damodarashtakam ki jai, Srila Sanatana Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.